Huh?
I think it's a key portion to the story because it helps us understand the narrative and it helps us understand as we jump from arc to arc with villain to villain.
Yeah, so as you were saying with Yu Yu Hakusho, they give you like a percentage, and we also have like tiers in Naruto, we have the Genin, stuff like that. But One Punch Man also does the same thing. They tell you, hey, look, this guy's a god level threat, this guy is a dragon level threat. So there's still some scaling there, because if we look at Boros, he's way more powerful than all these like city level characters, because Boros has stated, look, he can destroy the planet's surface if he wanted to. Or if you go by another translation, he could even destroy the entire planet. Not only Dragon Ball, but also One Punch Man, Naruto, One Piece, all these other shonens also have some sort of power scaling. And as I give you guys an example with Zeus and Odin and Marvel, there's some characters that barely have any feats, but they're stated or have been shown to be comparable to another. And I mean, DC also does the same thing, right? Almost any series you can think of that deals with some sort of fighting sequences, it should have some power scaling, or it does have power scaling in a way that either deals with exposition, percentages, classes, you know, I guess you could say an author statement even. But regardless, is there anything else you wanted to bring up, MJ?
I mean, dude, it's more than just cartoons and anime. It's like, look at movies like John Wick. You usually have John Wick like beating the foot soldier, then he'll move up to the, you know, the next in command, and they give him a bit more trouble, and then he moves up to the next guy. You know what I mean? It's like, it's there for a reason, guys. And I can't stand it when people say, well, power scaling is stupid, or that it doesn't matter. Like, it does, dog. Like it really does. I really don't get why people hate on it so much.
So how do you power scale a fictional character? Well, we must start off by listing out the two different types of evidence that are required when power scaling a particular character. These two things being the feats demonstrated by the character and the statements made about the character. A feat being defined as an achievement that requires great courage, skill, or strength, and a statement being defined as a definite or clear expression of something in speech or writing. So on the surface, both sound like pretty simple concepts to understand, right? Most of you probably believe that this is all you need. Well, it's time to get way more technical. Let's start off with feats. Like we already acknowledged, feats are essentially achievements made by someone that are worthy of acknowledgement, and feats can be categorized into almost anything, such as feats of strength, feats of agility, feats of intelligence, and the list goes on. I do plan on covering the complexities of each category of feats in their own separate videos, so let's move on. Feats actually have two different classifications, these being direct feats and indirect feats. Direct feats being the demonstration of a particular feat that has been performed by the character itself. For example, a character obliterating a planet would be classified as a direct feat because it's something that they have demonstrated themselves to be capable of doing. A character moving faster than their opponent is also a direct feat, because again, they themselves are demonstrating the ability to move faster than their opponent. So what about indirect feats? Well, indirect feats relate to what a character should be capable of that often falls back on a direct feat that they have demonstrated themselves. And what you'll also start to notice is that indirect feats are very much involved with how inverse scaling works. For example, Goku at the start of the Android arc was shown in Super Saiyan to be capable of tanking several sword slashes from future Trunks with only his finger, which is a direct feat. But when it comes to feats that involve fighting an opposing character, we have to ask ourselves, what makes fighting them actually impressive? Well, let's look back at what feats future Trunks has demonstrated so far. He was shown to be able to cut Mecha Frieza in half with a single slice and then sliced him up again into several pieces. Frieza himself has shown at bare minimum in a near-death state to survive a planet exploding on top of him without any further injuries. So because Goku during this time, as a Super Saiyan, scales above the attacks from future Trunks that recently cut Frieza into mincemeat, and Frieza can still tank planets exploding when in a near-death state, which indicates that this Super Saiyan Goku has indirect feats of him scaling above planetary very easily. So while direct feats are fairly easy to spot, and making sound arguments using them for a character are fairly simple to make. However, the strongest arguments for scaling a character at a certain level often involve the usage of indirect feats, which, although strong, tends to fly over the heads of many normies that float around the Versus community. For now, let's talk about statements, something a lot of people still seem to misunderstand. First, we must address what statements are in power scaling, how to judge the validity of a statement, and how they can be used as evidence. To properly explain what statements are, we must first ask ourselves, what's the main difference between feats and statements in power scaling? Well, in very easy and simple terms, feats are what's being shown, while statements are what's being told. This explanation works because it helps explain how you can take statements from books of literature and categorize them as feats, because although it may not be visually showing us what's going on, feats relate to the events that are taking place within the story being told. They aren't just about the big old pretty pictures. So what can statements provide that relates to power scaling? Well, there's at least one major thing that statements can provide in power scaling: context. Context being defined as the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, or idea, and in terms of which it can be fully understood and assessed. An easy example of this is when the story gives you a quick portfolio about the character, or in comics, where they monologue about the many great things that the characters accomplished throughout their life. To demonstrate the importance of context, let's pretend you've never seen this Batman scan before. Can you interpret what Batman is doing throughout all these scans without having the statements to better interpret what's going on? Not really. Without the context or statements, we couldn't really tell what he's doing in these scans that are worth praising. There's even this meme in power scaling that references the many times where in the story it seems like the character's performing all these good feats, but then it's later stated that it's all just a dream, and then it never happened. They just dreamt this up. But when it comes to using statements as evidence, we must first ask ourselves many important questions, such as who is making the statement, who or what is the statement referring to, what information is being provided by the statement, and probably the most important one, does the statement introduce a contradiction? Now, what these first three questions do is help better establish a significance into what's being said, while the fourth one relates back to the validity of the statement, and whether or not the statement being true would actually go against the story being told. So the answers to the second or third question ultimately don't really matter if you answer yes to the fourth question. Which would then bring us back to the first question: was the statement made by someone from within the story, such as a character or a narrator, or someone outside the story, such as an author, guidebook, director, etc.? If the statement was made by a character within the story, then the contradicting statement can be most often get easily explained via the context of the narrative. But if it was made by someone outside the story, then it can easily be dismissed, as the statement contradicts what occurs within the main source material and doesn't hold any value.
There's this concept that's hard for people to understand, is the concept of game mechanics. If Kratos is so strong, why does he need to struggle to open chests, do puzzles, and all that good stuff? Well, the answer is simple, actually. It's simply game mechanics. There's really nothing else to say about it. Game mechanics is the same reason why characters like Black Canary could actually beat Superman in a fight, because both characters have health bars, obviously, even though in the lore and canon that wouldn't be possible technically. Game mechanics is the same reason why Hulk doesn't one-shot every robot in the video games, because we know in narrative he would one-shot these little puny robots. Game mechanics is the reason why characters that are god of speed level characters like Hermes don't look like they're moving that fast in gameplay, so the player can actually keep up with in gameplay mechanic wise, but he would realistically be moving too fast for the eye to see. Like in the lore or narrative, or if they was to make it in the movie, they would have Hermes moving too quick. I know for people that are not used to analyzing stuff like this, find it hard to understand how can you tell whether something's game mechanics or a part of the lore. I will admit, it will take a little bit of critical thinking to really narrow it down, because not every game spells it out for you really easy. Especially games like God of War, where it's extremely immersive. Sometimes you can't tell whether they're talking in a game mechanic way or they're talking about the actual lore of the thing, because they kind of blend them together. Like, I'm gonna be honest, moments like this really just straight up just doesn't make no sense. Stating Mjolnir can't bust through some average ice, implying Kratos can't just punch his way down there. I know this could get confusing for people. Oh, if he's so strong, why can't he bust his way out of there? This simply just doesn't make sense, and is more than likely a game mechanic, even though they never straight up said it, obviously. Critical thinking will tell you, based on Kratos' history of beating gods, punching with his raw strength, it just doesn't make sense why he won't be able to bust through this ice unless this is like mystical ice or something. They literally had to use their brain, do a puzzle to get something else to fall on top of it for them to break through this ice. Not to mention, if this was actually accurate to the lore, he would one-shot these little fighter minions right here too. I mean, imagine not being able to break through some thick ice, but you can literally overpower physically big titans like Kronos, and can literally overpower beings that can hold the freaking sky, but he can't bust through some ice. Are you serious? Yeah, that's definitely a game mechanic.
Your tongue.